Okay, let's jump right in. Have you ever had a really clear thought, maybe an idea, or even quite a strong feeling about something,
Hmm.
but then when you try to actually say it in English, it just feels, well, flat?
Yeah, or maybe you get the words out, but you're worrying, did that sound too harsh? Or maybe, did I sound confident enough?
Exactly. It's a common challenge.
It really is. It's a fascinating step, isn't it? Moving past just getting the grammar right
Right.
to actually putting your identity across what you genuinely think and feel, through the language itself.
Absolutely. And that's pretty much exactly what we're exploring in this deep dive today. We're going to unpack some really, I think, incredibly useful material that a listener actually shared with
Oh,
us.
great.
Yeah, it's a resource all about speaking your mind, expressing opinions clearly, respectfully, and powerfully.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah.
So our goal here is basically to take that resource, pull out the best techniques, the really key phrases,
Yeah.
maybe flag some common mistakes people make, and look at the smart strategies it talks about.
Right. It's all geared towards helping you express yourself in English with, well, more clarity and definitely more confidence.
Because this skill and the source material really drives this home. It's fundamental, isn't it?
It really is.
It's how you build actual conversations, show you're thinking critically, show you're engaged.
And even start really thinking in English more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the core challenge, like the source points out, is hitting that balance
The balance between being honest, saying what you really think.
and doing it politely,
Mm-hmm.
respectfully. That's the tricky part.
It is.
And I think it's worth just pausing on that idea for a sec. The source really emphasizes that, expressing opinions. It isn't just like a language task.
No.
It's deeply connected to who you are in that language. How you voice your perspective literally shapes how others see you, and maybe just as importantly, how you feel taking part in the conversation.
That's such a great point. It's like putting your own personal signature on the language you're using.
Precisely. It's not just what you say, but how you communicate your view of the world.
Okay, so diving in. One of the first really helpful concepts this resource brings up is thinking about opinions almost on a spectrum.
Right. Not just black and white, agree or disagree.
Exactly. It suggests there are kind of three main levels you can operate on.
And understanding these helps you pick the right approach for the situation
Right.
and who you're actually talking to.
Totally. So at one end, you've got the strong opinion. This is very direct, assertive.
Leaves no doubt where you stand.
Right. The examples the source gives are pretty firm. Things like, I completely disagree, or this is absolutely the wrong approach.
You'd use that when maybe the stakes are high or you really need clarity, no ambiguity.
Then moving towards the middle, there's the softened opinion.
Okay.
This is where you give your view, but you often use phrases that signal, you've thought about other angles or that's complex.
So more balanced.
Yeah. The resource gives examples like, personally, I'm not so sure about that. Or maybe, I see your point, but here's another way to look at it. It invites a bit more discussion.
Gotcha. Allows for nuance.
And then at the other end, the most sort of diplomatic level is the neutral observation.
Oh, okay.
Here, you're not really stating your opinion directly, but commenting maybe on the situation or someone else's view, but in a non-committal way.
Like testing the waters.
Kind of. Or just acknowledging examples are like, that's an interesting perspective, or it's definitely a complex issue.
Right. You might use that if you genuinely don't have a strong opinion yet, or maybe the topic's a bit sensitive.
Exactly.
And knowing this spectrum exists is so useful because it makes you think deliberately. What's my goal here? Am I trying to persuade? Just contribute. Or simply acknowledge.
Yeah, choosing the right level makes a huge difference in how your message lands.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you figured out the level of intensity you want. Now you need the actual words, the
The
phrases.
building blocks.
Yes. And this resource, it's fantastic. It provides loads of essential phrases that are way more flexible than just saying, I think, all the time.
Right. And they're not just synonyms, are they? They carry slightly different weights, different levels of formality. They give your thoughts structure.
Exactly. So for just giving your opinion clearly, besides the obvious, I think, the source lists things like, I believe that, in my opinion, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it seems to me that, as far as I'm concerned.
And what's neat about those is they clearly signal this is my view, but with subtle differences.
Like what?
Well, from my perspective, kind of suggests your viewpoint is shaped by your specific experience or position.
Okay.
Whereas It seems to me that often implies you're making a judgment based on what you've observed, the available information.
Ah, I see. So using that variety makes you sound more, nuanced.
Definitely more thoughtful.
And look, a strong opinion is always better if you can actually back it up, right?
Very cool.
So for adding evidence or explanation, the material gives us phrases like, the reason I say that is because, or simply, for example.
Hmm. Or things like, what I've seen is, based on my experience.
Those really ground your opinion, don't they? Connect it to something concrete, a reason or a fact.
Yeah, it shifts it from just, this is how I feel, to this is a supported viewpoint.
Okay, but opinions rarely happen in a vacuum. You're usually talking with someone.
Right, so responding is key. And the resource covers this well.
For agreeing politely, it lists things we probably use already, but it's good to see them laid out. I completely agree with that. Oh, I think you're absolutely right.
Also simple ones like that's a good point.
And one I really like. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Oh, that's a great one. It really validates the other person's contribution, shows you're genuinely listening and even learning.
But let's be honest, you're not always going to like.
No, and disagreeing politely can be, well, pretty tricky in any language.
Definitely. So the source gives some excellent phrases for disagreeing respectfully. Things like, I see your point, but I have a different view.
Or, I'm not sure I agree with that. A bit softer.
Yeah. And that might be true, but acknowledging some validity first.
And I understand where you're coming from, however. That's another good.
Did you notice the pattern there?
Yes. Almost all of them start by acknowledging the other person's point before you introduce your disagreement.
Like, I see your point. That might be true. I understand where you're coming from.
That little bit of validation first, it's crucial, isn't it? It keeps the conversation respectful even when you have different views.
That's a really key insight from this material, I think. It's not just about firing off your opinion.
No.
It's about having a conversation, interacting with others' ideas.
And the source specifically says that using this kind of variety, these different phrases, instead of just falling back on I think or a blunt I agree or I disagree, it makes you sound much more sophisticated, more thoughtful. It shows you've got like a whole toolkit for expressing yourself.
Shows nuance.
Exactly. It communicates you're actually considering how you're saying things, not just what you're saying.
Okay, so we have the tools. Now, let's talk about some common pitfalls. The resource highlights several common mistakes that learners, well, often stumble into.
Yeah, and just being aware of these can make a big difference. These are habits that can really water down your message or even cause misunderstandings.
Mistake number one, and the source really calls this out, overusing I think.
Ah, the classic.
Right. It's not grammatically wrong, obviously, but hammering it constantly can make you sound hesitant, uncertain, even if you're actually quite sure.
It kind of weakens the statement.
Yeah. The material gives a good contrast. Instead of saying, maybe, I think it's good, I think we should try it, I think it works.
Repetitive.
Very. Try using things like, it seems effective, or from my perspective, it's worth a shot.
Think about the feel of that. I think it works. Sounds like a personal guess.
Mm-hmm.
It seems effective, feels more like a judgment based on observation. And from my perspective, roots it in your view, but feels more grounded.
It's subtle, but it really boosts the confidence level it projects.
Definitely.
Okay, mistake number two, being too blunt.
Ouch. Yeah.
Just saying, that's wrong, or I don't like it. It can feel really confrontational, can't it? It just shuts down the conversation.
It puts people on the defensive immediately.
But the source contrasts that wisely with a more constructive approach, like, I see it differently, and here's why.
See? That little addition, and here's why, completely changes the dynamic.
How so?
It turns what could be an argument starter into an invitation for discussion. It signals, I have reasons, and I'm willing to share them. Much more collaborative.
That makes sense. And mistake number three, one I think a lot of people, maybe especially learners, can relate to, over-apologizing.
Oh, yes. Apologizing for having an opinion.
The resource is quite firm on this. You don't need to say sorry just for having a different view.
Right. Phrases like, sorry, maybe I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
you're undermining yourself before you even start.
So what's the alternative?
The source suggests something much stronger, like, this might be a different take, but...
Okay.
See? It acknowledges it might diverge from the current line of thought, but it presents it as a valid perspective worth hearing.
It's about owning your voice, isn't it?
Exactly. Confidence without being aggressive.
Yeah.
It's a fine line, but that's the goal.
Okay, changing gears just a bit. The resource also looks at how to make your contributions feel more strategic, more impactful, especially in, say, a group discussion or a meeting.
Yeah, it introduces what it calls strategic phrasing for impact.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, these are phrases designed to help you enter the conversation smoothly, or add a layer of complexity, or maybe gently challenge an idea in a really constructive way.
Okay, like what?
They signal you're actively listening and thinking, not just waiting to talk. Things like, if I may add something,
Polite entry.
or there's another angle to consider, broadening the scope.
Ooh, I like that.
Or maybe, let me challenge that idea for a second. Direct, but invites thought.
Okay.
Or things like, that's a valid concern, but let's also keep in mind, acknowledges, then adds.
And one you highlighted earlier, which I also like, the reality might be more nuanced than that.
Yes, that one's great. It shows you're thinking critically, looking beyond the surface level.
It feels like these phrases really elevate the conversation, don't they?
They absolutely do. They show you're not just stating opinions, you're actively engaging with the process of the discussion, trying to deepen it. It demonstrates real intellectual engagement.
Now, here's something the resource calls an advanced skill, and it might seem counterintuitive at first.
Okay.
It's the ability to skillfully express uncertainty.
Ah, right. Because you don't always have a fully formed, strong opinion on everything, do you?
Exactly. And the source makes the point that pretending you do when you don't can actually be less effective.
Yeah, faking certainty can backfire.
Mm-hmm.
Expressing genuine uncertainty, when done right, is actually a sign of maturity.
Intellectual honesty. Yes. Not weakness.
So what are some good ways to do that? The source gives some excellent phrases for this. Things like, I'm still forming my opinion on this. Or, honestly, I'm on the fence about that one.
Okay, clear and honest.
Or, there are valid points on both sides, I think. Acknowledging complexity again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I'd like to explore more before I decide.
See, using phrases like that shows you're actively processing the information. You're engaged with the complexity.
Right, not just ducking the question.
Exactly. It signals you're weighing things up rather than being uninformed or just unwilling to engage. It can actually invite more discussion, not shut it down.
That's a really valuable perspective.
Yep.
Now, another section that I found really practical focuses on elevating your language. Power words for persuasive opinions.
Moving beyond the basics.
Yeah, it's all about swapping out weaker, maybe more general words for stronger, more precise alternatives.
This makes your language punchier, more impactful, takes it from just vague description to a clearer assertion. The examples given are fantastic for illustrating this. So instead of just saying something is good,
which can mean anything.
Right, consider beneficial or meaningful or impactful, much more specific.
Okay.
Instead of bad, maybe try problematic or ineffective or questionable.
Adds analytical weight.
Instead of the overused think, you could use believe or consider or even suggest.
Different nuances again.
For like, maybe explore, appreciate, value, or support.
Stronger verbs.
And for don't like, some powerful alternatives are oppose, reject, or find problematic.
Yeah, find problematic is a good one.
The resource shows the impact really clearly with an example upgrade. It takes, I don't like the idea.
Okay, pretty bland.
And transforms it into, I find the idea problematic because it might limit personal freedom.
Wow, okay. Big difference.
Huge, right. The second version isn't just more precise, it tells you why it's problematic. It's also way more persuasive because it includes the reasoning right there.
Makes your opinion concrete, understandable. Much more convincing.
Definitely. The material also, very wisely, I think, includes suggestions for real-life scenarios for practice.
You got to use it, right?
Exactly. And practice prompts. It recognizes that reading about this isn't enough. You need to actually try these techniques out.
So thinking about how you'd express opinions on, say, social media threads.
Yeah, or in team meetings at work, or maybe debating current topics like AI, or the effects of social media, work-life balance.
Things people actually talk about.
Right. And it even suggests recording yourself speaking about these prompts and then listening back.
Ooh, that can be tough, listening to yourself.
It can, but it's brilliant for self-correction, isn't it? Noticing where you hesitated, or maybe where you sounded too blunt without meaning to.
Absolutely. Practice is really the only way these phrases and strategies start to feel natural, become part of your active vocabulary.
And speaking of sounding natural,
Idioms.
You guessed it. The source includes a neat little section on idioms to express opinion naturally.
These can be tricky for learners, but oh, when used correctly.
They add that extra layer of fluency, don't they? Make you sound more native-like.
Definitely. So what gems do the source offer?
Okay, a few useful ones. At the end of the day,
Meaning, like, ultimately, or when everything's considered, a classic.
yep, then the jury's still out on that.
Ah, good one. Meaning people haven't decided yet, it's still uncertain.
Exactly. How about to play devil's advocate?
Oh yeah, arguing the opposite side, just for the sake of discussion, to test an idea, very useful in meetings.
Mm-hmm. And it's a double-edged sword.
Meaning something has both good and bad effects or consequences.
Right. And finally, a really common, kind of humble way to offer your opinion. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, signals it's just your personal view, you're not stating it as absolute fact. Nice way to soften things sometimes.
So using these idioms, appropriately allows you to express some quite nuanced ideas or qualify your statements in a really concise, natural-sounding way.
It definitely adds flavor.
So I guess bringing this deep dive towards a close,
Hmm?
the big message, the overarching takeaway from this resource seems really clear.
Which is?
That expressing your opinion effectively in English is, well, it's a complex skill. It's about way more than just knowing the right words or getting the grammar perfect.
It really is. It involves building confidence, definitely. And strategically choosing your tone. Remembering that spectrum we talked about based on who you're talking to in the situation.
And using that whole toolkit of varied phrases we discussed, not just relying on one or two.
And maybe most importantly, engaging respectfully. Remembering it's a conversation.
Yeah, the goal isn't always to win the argument or to be aggressively right.
No. It's about being clear, being calm, and ideally being kind in how you present your perspective, even when you disagree.
This material really gives you the tools and the mindset, I think, to practice speaking with more intention.
To move beyond that hesitation many learners feel.
And to really own your voice in English, find your way of expressing you.
Which is incredibly empowering.
It really is. And maybe that leads us to a final thought to leave you with, something sparked by this deep dive.
Yeah.
In today's world, which is just absolutely overflowing with information, with opinions coming at us from everywhere,
Constantly.
what unique responsibility maybe comes with developing the ability to articulate your own viewpoint clearly, thoughtfully, and respectfully?
That's a deep question.
How does honing this skill not only help clarify your own thinking, but how might it also contribute to a more constructive, maybe more understanding, collective conversation?
Yeah, how can thoughtful expression actually shape understanding in a positive way?
Yeah.
It gives you the power to influence the conversation, not just add noise.
Exactly. Something to ponder. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into mastering the art of expressing opinions with skill and confidence.
Thanks for listening. Hey there, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're really glad you could join us today
Yeah, great to be diving into this.
because we're looking at something pretty transformative for how you use English.
Yeah.
We're kind of stepping away from the dry textbooks for a bit. This is all about making your communication, vibrant, memorable, and, well, authentically you.
That's exactly it. We've been digging into this really fantastic source material. It really highlights the incredible power of storytelling in English, something that's often overlooked, I think.
Really?
It shows that mastering this, it isn't just for like professional writers or performers. It's actually a fundamental skill for anyone who wants to really connect with people.
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive, it's pretty straightforward, but hopefully really powerful. We're basically pulling out the core ideas and the most practical, actionable tips from this source.
Right.
We want to give you the tools to make your English conversations, well, captivating, to connect on a deeper level, and honestly, just make your ideas stick.
Because, as the source points out right at the start, storytelling is often called the glue of communication.
The glue of communication, I like that.
Yeah, think about it, right? Why do some conversations really stay with you while others just fade? Often it's the story that's woven in. It's that human element, that makes the information actually resonate.
That framing really hits home, doesn't it? Especially if you're working on improving your English.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just like nailing the grammar.
Exactly.
It focuses on being relatable, being understood, sharing your world.
Right. So the source kicks off by really digging into the why. Why is telling a story so much more effective than just laying out the facts?
Well, the first point they make, and it's so true, is that our brains seem just wired for narrative, for stories. They're just fundamentally easier for us to remember than, say, a list of bullet points or abstract ideas.
And what I found particularly insightful for English learners is the idea that stories can actually make your English sound more natural.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, even if you don't feel perfectly fluent yet, when you're telling a personal story, you're using language that feels authentic to your experience. And that often kind of smooths over those moments where you might be searching for the absolutely perfect word or, the precise grammatical structure.
Right. It feels less like you're reciting something and more like you're just sharing.
Exactly.
And the source lists some really compelling benefits for doing this. We're talking about expressing experiences clearly, even complex ones.
Creating that genuine emotional connection with whoever you're talking to.
Yeah, and sounding more advanced, more expressive than maybe just using purely academic language would allow.
And crucially, just keeping people interested. Let's be honest, nobody really drifts off during a good story, do they?
Not usually, no. So this raises a key question, which the source tackles right away. What kind of stories are we talking about here? Do you need some big dramatic adventure?
And the answer is a clear no. The source really emphasizes this. You don't need high drama. Simple, true stories from your everyday life. They're incredibly powerful.
Like what kind of things?
Oh, that awkward moment at the checkout or a small win at work, something funny your kid did, maybe a challenge you faced and how you dealt with it. These little slices of life are what connect us.
Okay, so we get the power, the why. But how do you actually do it, especially if you feel like your English skills are still, developing?
Well, this is where the source gets really practical. It gives us a simple kind of repeatable structure in what they call part 2.
A structure.
Right.
Takes the scariness out of it.
Exactly. It breaks down this potentially big idea of telling a story into a basic map. Just 5 key components that most effective simple stories tend to follow, whether they're funny or serious.
Okay, let's break those down. First step is the setup.
Right, just setting the scene, who was there, when did it happen, where, just giving your listener the context they need.
Got it. Then comes the problem.
Yeah, this is kind of the engine of the story. Something unexpected happens, a complication, a challenge pops up, or maybe you just made a mistake. This creates the interest, the bit of tension.
Okay, setup, problem, then action.
What did you do about the problem? Or what happened next? This moves the story forward.
Makes sense.
Sure.
And after the action comes the result.
Yep. How did it all turn out in the end? Was the problem solved? What was the immediate outcome?
And finally, and this seems important, the reflection.
Crucial. This is often missed. What did you learn? How did you feel about it later? What's the main takeaway? So what you want to share?
The source has a little example for this, right? The wallet one.
Yeah, a perfect tiny example. It goes something like, last year, that's the setup, I lost my wallet on the train. Problem. I panicked for a second, then decided, okay, run back to the station. Action. A cleaner had actually found it and handed it in. Result. I realized then I really had to be way more careful with my important stuff. Reflection.
Look at that. It's a complete little story. Beginning, middle, end, and that reflection piece. You can map almost anything onto that, couldn't you?
Pretty much. It gives you guardrails, helps you organize your thoughts before you even open your mouth. It's really helpful.
Okay, so structure helps organize. But what about making the language itself flow more naturally? Making it sound more, like fluent English. The source gets into that in part 3. The useful phrases.
Yes, and these are gold. They're not just random words. They act like little signposts, guiding your listener through the story and making you sound more fluent. They break them down by the stage of the story.
So for starting a story, instead of just jumping in cold,
you could use things like, this happened a while back, or so something really strange happened the other day, or a classic one, let me tell you about this time when, just eases you in.
Nice. And for moving the story along, especially when something sudden happens.
Phrases like, all of a sudden, or out of nowhere, the next thing I knew, those build a bit of pace. And if you need to skip some details, long story short is brilliant.
Oh yeah, long story short is a lifesaver sometimes. What about showing emotion or surprise?
Crucial for drawing the listener in. Things like, I couldn't believe it, or it was totally the last thing I expected. My heart was racing, or even, oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed. These they don't just tell the emotion.
Right, they use common expressions.
Yeah.
And for wrapping up, for that reflection part,
you could use, looking back now, it's actually kind of funny, or in the end, it all worked out okay. Still think about that sometimes. Or the very useful, it taught me a valuable lesson. These signal the end nicely.
Using those phrases, it's like adding, I don't know, punctuation to your spoken story. It just helps it flow better.
Exactly, like greasing the wheels, makes you sound more connected, more natural.
And to really see this in action, the source provides some real-life examples in Part 4. Simple, relatable stories that show the structure and phrases working together.
Yeah, like the travel story. Someone gets lost in Paris, their phone's dead, they don't speak French, feeling totally stuck.
Oh no, I've been there.
Right. So they finally ask a local for help, probably expecting a struggle, and the person not only speaks perfect English, but walks them right to where they needed to go.
Oh, lovely.
And the takeaway the source highlights isn't just about finding the place, it was that moment that kind of restored faith in people. See? Simple event, emotional punch.
That makes it a story. What about the funny mistake one?
Oh, the classic learner mistake, accidentally saying, I'm boring, instead of I'm bored to someone they'd just met.
Ouch.
Exactly. The source points out that immediate wave of embarrassment, but also the very clear lesson learned.
Yeah.
Always double check those ing versus said adjectives.
Yes, every learner has a story like that, I bet. Painful then, but funny later, and super relatable.
Totally. It builds connection through that shared experience of, well, messing up sometimes. And the third example was about a lesson learned the hard way.
Right, the interview one.
Missing an important online interview because they got the time zones wrong. The source talks about the immediate, pain and frustration of that mistake.
Oh, gutting.
But how it led to a really lasting, deeply ingrained lesson about always double-checking critical details like time zones.
Yeah, those painful mistakes often make the strongest stories, don't they? Because they show vulnerability, real learning. These examples really drive home that point.
Yeah.
Your everyday life is packed with story material.
Definitely. You just need that simple structure and maybe a few of those handy phrases to unlock them.
So moving beyond what you say, the source then dedicates Part 5 to how you say it. Building suspense, keeping listeners hooked, using your voice and details.
Yeah, your voice is such a powerful tool here. They suggest using pauses. A well-timed pause, especially right before a twist or a punchline. It builds anticipation.
Like, and then.
Yeah.
Slight pause.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing happened. That pause makes you lean in, right?
Exactly. And vocal variation. Don't just speak in a monotone. Change your pitch, your volume to match the feeling of the moment. A bit higher for surprise, maybe lower for something serious or suspenseful. It adds color.
Makes it much more engaging.
There you go.
Details.
Key, but the source gives good advice. Use them like spices, not the main course. Just enough to paint a picture without slowing things down too much. Their example was great. Not just a cafe, but a tiny cafe with this warm smell of cinnamon, and you could hear jazz music playing softly.
Nice. Just a couple of sensory details makes it vivid.
Totally. And finally, showing your reactions as you tell the story. Don't just narrate events dryly. React to them.
Like saying, I was shocked, or I just burst out laughing.
Yeah, or my jaw just dropped. It makes you sound more natural, and it helps the listener feel the emotion along with you.
Okay, so combining the structure, the phrases, these delivery techniques, that already seems like a huge step forward. But the source goes even further in Part 6, talking about boosting vocabulary, specifically with emotional adjectives.
This is such a practical tip. Instead of just defaulting to basic words like happy, sad, scared, the source encourages expanding your emotional vocabulary.
So instead of happy, maybe thrilled, delighted.
Exactly. Or content. Instead of just scared, try terrified or anxious or uneasy, depending on the flavor of the fear.
And for angry, maybe furious, irritated, annoyed. Surprised could be stunned, amazed, shocked.
Precisely. The source gives this tiny example, changing I was very happy to I was absolutely thrilled.
Oh yeah, you can really feel the difference
That's
there.
so much more expressive. It lets your listener connect more deeply with the actual feeling you're trying to convey. Adds real depth.
That precision definitely adds something. And speaking of connecting, Part 7 reminds us that storytelling isn't just a one-way broadcast. It's about the listener, too.
Right. It's not a performance at someone. It should feel like an interaction with them. It's about making your story relatable to their life, their experiences.
How do you do that? The source suggests some techniques.
Yeah, things to actively involve the listener, like using rhetorical questions.
The kind you don't really expect an answer to, but they make the listener think or nod along.
Exactly. Like, you know that feeling when your stomach drops because you think you've lost your keys? Or have you ever been in a spot like that where one tiny mistake felt huge? It just pulls them in.
Creates common ground. What else?
Showing vulnerability. Being willing to admit when you felt unsure, or you messed up, or you struggled a bit.
Ah, Like saying,
Phrases like, honestly, I had no idea what to do next, or I was really afraid I'd completely messed everything up. It makes you seem human, relatable, builds trust, actually.
that makes sense. And sometimes just using the word you within the story itself.
Yeah, to describe a kind of universal feeling, like it's like when you try something new for the first time and you feel completely awkward. It frames your specific experience in a way the listener can immediately slot into their own understanding.
These techniques really shift the feel, don't they? It becomes less about just recounting events and more about sharing an experience.
You're inviting the listener into a shared human moment through your story.
Okay, so we've got the why, the how structure, phrases, delivery, better words, and connecting with the listener. Now, the crucial bit, actually doing it. Parts 8, 9, and 10 in the source are all about practice and action.
This is where the rubber meets the road, right? The source gives repeat after me phrases. These are designed to help build fluency with common storytelling language patterns.
Just practicing saying them out loud.
Yeah, simple ones like, I'll never forget that time, or looking back, it seems funny now, but at the time. Just saying them helps them feel natural when you need them in a real conversation.
They also provide speaking prompts, right?
Yeah.
Ideas for stories.
Yep. To get you started if you're staring blankly, think about a time you were really surprised, a time you helped someone out, a funny misunderstanding, something you learned the hard way. Your life is full of this stuff.
It really is when you start looking. And they also included some idioms.
Yes, in part 9. Useful idioms for storytelling to add a bit more color and naturalness. Things like, it was a real roller coaster of emotions, or it caught me completely off guard, turned out to be a blessing in disguise, or someone saved the day. Using idioms like that makes your English sound richer.
Okay, so lots of tools. What's the actual plan for practicing? Part 10 lays that out.
Yeah, it's clear and manageable. They suggest daily practice, just 10 or 15 minutes. Pick one simple story idea, record yourself telling it, maybe using the structure, trying one new phrase.
And then listen back. Cringe, potentially.
Maybe a little, but the goal isn't harsh criticism. It's just to notice, like, oh, that worked well, or, maybe I could replace that generic word with a stronger one next time.
Oh.
Gentle refinement.
Consistency sounds key for the daily stuff. What about weekly?
For weekly practice, they suggest more interactive things. Maybe write out a story, then practice telling it without reading. Find a language exchange partner specifically to swap stories with.
Oh, good idea.
Or consciously observe great storytellers watch TED Talks, for instance, but focus on how they weave in personal anecdotes and, crucially, build a story bank.
A story bank?
Right.
Like a list?
Exactly. Just a running list on your phone or notebook. Anytime something small happens, awkward encounter at the supermarket, unexpected compliment, tried that new recipe, disaster, jot it down. Then you've got material ready to go when you want to practice.
That's brilliant. It takes the pressure off thinking of something on the spot.
And it reinforces that core idea. Your own life, your experiences, they are valuable communication tools. It's not about having perfect grammar right away. It's about sharing your reality.
Which really brings us full circle back to the source's main message, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The core takeaway is just so powerful. Telling stories makes you real, it makes you relatable, and it makes you memorable when you speak English.
And maybe the most freeing part of it all is, don't aim for perfection. Just use your life, use your voice, use your actual emotions now.
Right, those little hesitations, maybe a small grammatical slip. That's okay. It just becomes part of your authentic voice, part of the story itself. That's where the magic is, really.
It really is. And this leads to the challenge the source puts out there, doesn't it? Something practical for you, the listener, to try.
Yes, a clear call to action for this week.
They challenge you. Pick just one real-life story.
Yeah.
Any simple one from your story bank, maybe.
And just tell it. Tell it to the mirror, record it on your phone, tell a friend, whatever feels comfortable.
The focus isn't on flawless delivery. It's about trying that structure, maybe using one or two new phrases, adding a little detail, and just aiming to connect.
That's the goal. Connection, not perfection.
Because, as the source so powerfully concludes, your stories matter. Your voice deserves to be heard. This whole deep dive really hammered that home for me.
Me too. It shows how achievable it is, just by tapping into the stories you already have inside you. Find one this week. Tell it. See what happens.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of storytelling. We really hope this helps you unlock the power of your own voice in English.